it can be dangerous. It's a risk anytime you do bring an animal into your flock. And so that's when it's really good to know who you're buying from and how they raise their birds. And the only way you really can do that is to talk to that person and maybe even go ahead and take a visit to their farm and see how they raise them. And then you can ask them questions about what type of feed they use. Do they use any type of parasite treatment? If they have young birds, some people use a coccidia treatment to go ahead and make sure that coccidia is not going to be a problem. You don't have to. It all depends on your management plan for your birds. And each farm, whether you have a biosecurity plan to go ahead and keep diseases out of your farm or away from your animals, is going to be really unique and independent for that farm. And so that not everybody does everything the same way, and the risks for some farms are not as high as risks for others. And so those are all things to take into account. Part of keeping the birds healthy and happy outside is making sure they have fresh, clean water and the proper food. Make sure that you restrict pests from getting in, whether it's wild birds from getting into the coop and eating the food, or even rodents that may come in. And then you have to worry about, up here in some areas of the state, you have to worry about predators coming in to eat your chickens. I mean, it's been a big problem down in Juneau where bears can come in and knock down coops and do some damage that way. Diseases can be spread a number of different ways. They can be spread by an aerosol. So if a chicken, and they can cough and sneeze, they'll go ahead and have an aerosol come out, and it can land on another bird, or it can get into a feed dish or a water bowl, or maybe in the bedding that they're on. And so if you use the same container to transfer a number of birds, or if you use your cage and give it to your neighbor to go ahead and use to move their birds, then you could be transmitting a disease that way. Diseases can also be spread in the manure or the droppings. They can be spread by direct contact between birds. And they can be transferred by us. So like if I went ahead and picked up a sick bird, I could get the virus or a bacteria on my hands. And then if I'm not careful and clean my boots or my hands or my clothes and be going between farm to farm or poultry operation to poultry operation, I can be the spreader of those diseases. So it's really important with respect to when you have visitors on to your poultry operation or your backyard flock, is you make sure that they come in and they're going to be clean, and then when they go out, they're going to wash their hands and make sure you have good sanitation that way as well. And the other way it can be transmitted is by wild birds. And so if you end up having your poultry that's a free range outdoors, then you really need to be careful, because as you see wild birds, or especially waterfowl, come in, because waterfowl are one of the main carriers for avian influenza. They carry a low pathogen strain of avian influenza that doesn't really make them sick, but they can go ahead and make poultry sick. And they can actually carry the high pathogen strains as well. And oftentimes those high pathogen strains, they're called high pathogen because they make poultry sick. They generally don't make the wild birds sick. The things in general are to go ahead and make sure that you don't bring disease into your flock, and that would mean making sure the birds you bring in are healthy. The feed that you bring in is not contaminated, or may not be a source of contamination or bringing disease into your flock. The equipment that you bring in, you make sure you wash it and clean it before you introduce it into the birds. And not that your neighbor is a problem, but you don't want to go ahead even exchanging equipment between neighbors. If you have to do that, it's best not to, but if you have to, then just make sure you clean and wash that and disinfect it. It's the same way if somebody borrowed something from me, I would probably clean it, and I would encourage them to go ahead and re-clean it before they brought it over there, just to make sure that you're not going to take that risk. Because the problem is once you bring a disease into a flock, it can spread very rapidly because the birds are in close contact with another. And so it's not one bird's going to get sick, a lot of birds can get sick. And that can be a real hardship on you, that you may end up having birds sick or die. And if you're depending on those eggs to eat for your home or to sell, then all of a sudden you're not going to even have that. And you're going to be maybe needing to treat those animals, and you won't be able to eat their eggs while they're under treatment. So it can be a real hardship and a real problem to deal with. Make sure that you keep those diseases that the birds may have and carry, that maybe not harming them, but can harm people, that can transfer to people. So you want to make sure that you use proper sanitation when you go back into the house. So that when you bring eggs in, you make sure you keep those clean. Wash your hands after handling your birds.